What's going on, everybody? My name is Draft Anatomy, and I am going to try and do a video based on a request from somebody in the SMITE dojo. They basically sent me this question. I'll read it to you guys. It says, maybe a good idea, just go through the god list and talk about where they're primarily played and why. It would help a lot of new players who aren't sure who goes where or how to flex different gods in certain roles. So what I'm going to do, I'm literally going to go through every god. I'm going to try and do this as fast as possible. I'll give you their main role, and I will give you probably a flex role that you can play them in. Sometimes they have 3 roles that they can be flexed in, right? I'm literally going to go A through Z. We're going to talk about the gods. I won't get too deep into the roles themselves. I think I'm going to do a separate video for each role and like the top gods to play in those roles, right? But I will go through every one here. So if you want to find one, I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to put chapters through it all, but if you want to find a specific one, like say, Set, and you're wondering like, where can I play Set? You're just going to have to skip through the video to find where I start talking about the S's, right? To get to him. But what I'm going to do, I'm just going to go one by one. We'll go over what roles they can be played in. I'm not going to really elaborate any further than that. And then in my other videos, when I talk about the role itself, I'll talk a little bit more deeply about what makes those gods good in that role, right? So let's start off with Achilles. Achilles can be played as a solo lane. That's his main role and main function. He can be flexed as a jungle, though. You can build him full damage. His execute's really good in both roles, right? So Achilles can be played in the solo lane, or he can be played and flexed as a jungler, right? Support, not so much. Probably like a really bad support. I've seen some people play warrior supports. He's not really one of them. Let's talk about Agni. Agni is played in mid. Probably all he will ever be played in. If you play jungle Agni, you just have to be bored, basically. Only play Agni in mid. That's about it for him. Amuz Cobb. Amuz Cobb is designed as a hunter in Smite, so obviously the carry role is where he belongs the most often, but he can be played and flexed as a mid laner. He actually does really well in mid because you can build him more ability based because of the way his abilities work, the way his hives work, his honey and his bees and all that stuff. He actually has a really good poke, so he can be played as a mid laner. He can also be flexed into solo. Rarely. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know how to build him correctly. You need to know your matchups properly to ever play him in solo lane, but it can be done. So those are the roles he's good at. Apach, you can't even play him in mid. I'm just moving. No, I'm kidding. Mid lane, that's about it for him. He's one of like the worst gods to play in Conquest just because the way his kit is, the gank ability. You need to have a team comp built around him, all that stuff to play him effectively, like really know him in and out, know who your matchups are and stuff. He's like a very niche pick right now, right? But mid lane only. Amaterasu is built and designed for solo lane. She can be flexed into like a jungle or a support role, rarely, right? With her kit, but mainly solo is where she shines the most. On her, same sort of thing. He's going to be carry more often than not. He's going to be played as an ADC. Can possibly be flexed into mid lane, very rarely solo. Anubis. Mid lane is where you're going to see him more often than not. Almost always, like 99% of the time. You can play an Anubis jungle if you want to have fun and meme around. Ao Kuang, he is designed as a mage, but honestly, he's really like, because he's short range with his attacks and everything, he's designed for jungle, right? So you're going to see Ao Kuang in the jungle more often than not. That's his main role. He can be flexed as mid. He can also be flexed as a solo lane. He actually does better in solo than as a mid, I think. So you'll find him as a jungle first and foremost, maybe solo lane, possibly mid, and then I've seen weird tank builds on him too, as a tank support Ao Kuang, but that's also meme stuff. You're down in the meme territory. His main roles are jungle first, maybe a solo laner. Aphrodite, play her in mid. I have seen her played in solo and support as well. Those are niche options and meme options as well. Most of the time, you kind of want to play her in mid role. Apollo ADC more often than not. Sometimes you can play him in solo just because of his ultimate and the way he can gank and stuff. He can rotate to team fights pretty easily, but you're going to see him as a carry, as an ADC more often than not. Arachne, basically a jungler. First and foremost, you're going to see her as a jungle full damage more often than not. You can build tank Arachne, use her spiders and your cocoon to really like stick on people. That's also a niche kind of option, but you can see her like flexed into like a support role or something like that as well. Ares, first and foremost, he's a support, really good support. He can be flexed into the solo lane. He's actually really good guardian solo that you'll see a lot of the time. So those are his two main roles that he can be played in. Artemis, ADC, almost always. You really don't want her anywhere else. She will just get dunked on in mid and gank too much, and then she doesn't really work as like solo unless like hunters are super OP, and then you can play like anti-hunter in solo, right? That kind of thing. Ardeo, designed as a support, pretty decent at support. She actually shines as solo lane the best. So solo lane is her first lane that you want to consider her in. She's really good at solo. Build her as a magical guardian solo or support. She's also pretty decent as a support character too. Athena can be played as a support. That's what she was designed for. But she also flexes into jungle very, very well. Actually, if you build a full damage Athena because of her global ult, she's actually a really good jungler. So I would say support and jungle are main roles, and then solo is like a flex role you can play with her as well. So those are the three roles you can play her. Atlas, designed as a support. That's probably where you'll see him most of the time. You can flex him into solo if you want. That's, like I said, a little bit more niche and everything again. To see like a solo Atlas, he isn't as good as some other guardians that flex in there because of the way they like nerfed his kit and stuff. So you'll see him as support like 90% of the time. Awilish, basically a jungler. That's about it for her. If you play her as a solo lane, it's to like try and dunk on the other dude and then get ahead, and you're basically unkillable and you kill them like 90% of the time. So jungle first and foremost. Maybe you can flex her as like a solo depending on the meta, depending on what's going on, or if you know your matchup really, really well. Baba Yaga, mid lane is her main role. You'll play her in mid most of the time, but she does flex into solo pretty well because of the way she double stacks. Like she can stack multiple items, so she can stack things like Warlocks, Book of Thoth, like Hide of the Urchin, like these things, and then because you can stack all of them really well with her and really fast, you can actually build her like half tanky. Because of like Urchin and some other defensive items, and she still hits really, really hard because you're able to stack like a Warlocks and stuff with her too still. So you'll rarely see her in solo lane, but mostly mid. Bacchus, you'll see him as support more often than not. He doesn't flex into like solo and stuff as well. You can build a full damage Bacchus and play him in the jungle for like a meme or a fun time. He's actually not too bad like that. He does a lot of burst damage if you build him full damage, but he's first and foremost a support. Bakasura, you will see him in the jungle. That's his main role. He can be flexed into solo, but once again, you're not playing him as a traditional solo laner. You're playing him like you would play like Cleo or something, where you're like clearing wave and then you're going and doing their camps and trying to outfarm somebody. So Bakasura is a very niche solo lane pick that's meta sometimes, depending on like item changes and stuff like that. But yeah, so you'll see him in the jungle more often than not though. Baron Samday. Baron is he's very flexible. He was designed and built as a mage. I honestly think he shines more as a solo laner, and even like as a support character. So you'll see him in mid. He's fine as a mid laner. I'm not saying he's bad, but he's really good as a solo laner. I think the way you can build him tanky with some lifesteal and stuff, he becomes hard to kill, does a lot of utility for his teammates. You can also build him full defense, and he's still a very good support with the way he can slow people, so he can heal his teammates, and his ultimate is a very good setup tool. So those are the three roles you can play him in. Bastet is basically a jungler. Niche solo pick if you know a matchup very well. Bellona, you're going to play her in solo lane first and foremost, but she can actually be flexed into like a jungle or even as like a ADC, if you're playing like weird team comps or something like that. Like those are niche meme picks, but you're gonna see her as a solo lane more often than not. Kabrakan, he is one of those gods that can also flex multiple roles pretty well. Built and designed as a support. You can always play him as a support. He'll never be like bad. But he does really well as a solo laner, and he actually does really, really well as a jungler as well. Kabrakan jungle is literally a thing. You build like straight straight offense, like you're just in Polynomicon, you just delete people. You run up to them, one them, auto, two them, auto, and they die more often than not. Especially the squishies, right? So you can build like a full power penetration Kabrakan and just melt people in jungle. So he has those 3 roles: support, solo, and jungle. Camazotz, built as an assassin, but played in solo lane a lot as well. So you'll see him in jungle. You will see him in solo lane. Those are probably his main 2 roles. Cerberus, built as a support. He is a really good support. He has like that whole anti-heal aspect, but he's also a really good solo because of this. If you are going up against somebody with healing, like Guan Yu or Hercules, Cerberus is actually a really good pick into those guys. So yeah, Cerberus is a good support and a good solo lane. Cernanos, built as an ADC, like a carry, right? He's a hunter. He'll always be good in that role, in that lane. He can flex into the jungle. Once again, niche, but his clear is pretty good between his glaive, which can hit multiple targets, right, and then his brambles, right. You can clear jungle camps pretty fast with him, so he can be flexed into jungle occasionally if you want to do like a ranged jungler. He's fine in that role. Chalk is a good solo laner. You can build him full damage, but that's meme, right? If you want to do weird meme chalk things, you can do that, but he's basically played as a solo laner, period. That's about it. Chunga, really good mid. People say you can play her in solo. I wouldn't recommend it. It's not the best. She's better in mid. If you flex her in a solo, you're like memeing or throwing or trolling or whatever. There are people that are good with her, don't get me wrong. Like somebody will defend it, be like, oh, that solo deletes blah blah blah, and it's like, yeah, okay, maybe in like a very specific matchup against somebody that's like worse than you, but more often than not, player in mid, you'll do fine. Lots of healing. Yeah, build like damage and healing with her, and you'll do okay. Charybdis, ADC, that's about it. For her, she plays as a carry more often than not. Chernobog, same thing. He's played as a carry. I've seen some people play him as a jungle because of his ult, but not really. So he's basically a carry, period. That's where you're gonna find him the most. Chiron, he plays carry, so he plays in dual lane, but he can also, just like Amuz and Cobb, he can be flexed into mid lane very easily. So you can play him mid if you want because of the way his kit works. He kind of is like a physical mage, with like kind of how he can do certain things, and stuff like that. So you can play him mid if your ADC is magical. Somebody picks Soul or something, you can take Chiron and play him mid. Kronos, built as a mage, does okay as a mage in mid lane, but I think he shines more as a magical ADC. So you can actually play Kronos as in duo lane as a carry. I've seen some weird solo builds on him too. I don't think he's as good solo, but he can be played as solo, right? Solo is that weird role where it's like you can kind of play whatever sometimes, but you can actually build him like pretty tanky, kind of like in Ao Kuang, where like things like Stone of Foul would work okay with him in solo lane, so he's not going to just like die immediately and be run out when like the warrior's attacking him, right? He'll be able to survive that kind of stuff. But I think he shines as an ADC first and foremost. So Cleo is built for the jungle and as an assassin in Smite, but she flexes into solo very, very well. So those are her two roles because of her healing in her kit and the way that she is able to like walk through walls and basically like hyper farm and stuff like that. She can clear a wave with one use of her ult. So you basically do that and then you go and do other stuff like when you're in solo lane with her. She actually is pretty good like that, and then you can build her a little beefier with some lifesteal and stuff, and she sustains pretty well in lane. So jungle or solo for Cleo. Cthulhu, built as a support, not very good as a support, honestly. He does better in solo lane. So I would say solo lane is Cthulhu's main role. With a support flavoring, and like maybe you can play him mid if you're like sticking around. So, so solo first and foremost, then a support for Cthulhu. Cuckoo lane. Solo lane is his main role. I've seen him really play nothing but like solo lane. Like that's where you're gonna play him. He doesn't really flex into other things as much. If he does, somebody's memeing or it's like an arena or something. Cupid, one of those gods that can also flex into mid. He's an ADC. He can be played in dual lane, but you can flex him into mid. Same sort of stipulations as like Chiron or AMC, right? If you have a magical ADC, you can play Cupid in mid and be okay with him. So like some hunters can flex into mid. Cupid's one of those ones. Daji is basically a jungler, and that's it. I don't see her played anywhere else. Danzaboro, a little unique. Definitely more of like an ADC than anything else. I've seen some people try and jungle with him, not very well. So he's really like an ADC first and foremost. Discordia basically plays mid. That's about it. Erlong Shen, he is built as a warrior in solo lane, but he actually flexes as a jungle very, very well. So he will be treated like an auto attack jungler if you're going to play jungle with Erlong Shen. So him and like Osiris, you kind of treat them like they're like a nemesis almost, with the way you build them, like auto attack based, a lot of penetration. They can chase you down and really do a lot of damage to you with their autos. So solo and jungle for Erlong Shen. Eset, mid lane. That's like 90% of the time, right? She can be flexed as a support character. You need to know what you're doing. You need to know your matchups to do that. You need to know how to build her properly to do something like that. But mid lane, first and foremost, can be flexed as a support just because her ultimate's really good. Her spirit ball stuns, right? Like those sorts of things. Her silence, her 3 and everything works well as like a team oriented thing for catching people out and setting up kills and stuff. So mid and support for Eset. Fafnir is basically a support. That's about it. He's kind of like a niche support when you're really working well with your team and able to use that coerce, right? His ability for your teammates. So supports his main role. Fenrir can be played in the jungle. That's what he's built for. That's what he's meant for. He can also flex into a support role. If you build him full defense, he can do pretty well. You can stun people with your leap if you have your runes up. You can grab people with your ultimate. You basically use his ultimate as a support to go and catch somebody that's squishy. You're either burning their beads or their beads are down, so you grab them, you bring them back to their team, and delete them off the face of the map. So you bring one person back to your 4, all 5 of you just dunk on them. Now it's a 4v5, right? That's basically what you use him for as a support. He can be played maybe as a solo too. I don't see that as often. But mainly jungle and support for Fenrir there. And then maybe a flex into solo. Freya. Freya is considered a mage, so she can be played mid lane, but I think she's one of those ones that also shines as a magical ADC, especially right now. With so much farm being over in duo lane, if you can get ahead with Freya, you can farm really fast, get ahead in levels, and because of that, you're able to get to late game with Freya, which is always nasty. She just bursts people down if she builds full attack speed and lifesteal and stuff. So Freya is either a magical ADC or you can play her in mid lane. Like rarely jungle. You could flex her into a jungle if you want to have fun or do something weird. Meme around. Ganesh, support character. That's basically it. I've seen people play him in solo or as mid. That's just fun meme shit. Play him as a support if you're being serious. Geb, same sort of thing. Support first and foremost. I will see some solo Gebs do okay. So you can build solo Geb. I've also seen jungle Gebs do things. Those are more meme builds or very specific things if you want to have fun or try things out. If you're playing him serious, play him in solo or support. Gilgamesh, support first and foremost. Not support. He's a solo first and foremost. Play him in solo lane. if you want, you can flex him as a jungle. Build him full damage. He'll do okay. Guan Yu is a solo lane first and foremost. Could possibly be flex as a support if you're doing weird stuff. But he's really a solo like 95% of the time. You build him as support, you're basically building defense. You're building more lifesteal items so you can spam your one. Like you're building cooldown and spamming your one a lot. Your ultimate is good for chasing people down and setting up maybe like a kill or something like that. But play him as a solo. Hachiman, he basically sits as an ADC. That's about it. Hades is he's a mage right now, but not a very good one. Playing him in mid lane is hard because of there's just so many. Not that he's bad, it's just every other mid is like good. If that makes sense. He is actually a pretty good solo laner right now, so you can actually flex Hades as a solo. Because you're dealing more with like the physical short ranged solos, right? Going Hades isn't as bad. When you're doing that, he can heal off wave, he can sustain very well in lane, so he does well as a solo. Mid lane's a problem because you're dealing with magical ADCs that normally have abilities that can like hit you from afar. That's where Hades' weakness starts lying, or they have like escapes and leaps and stuff. He does a little bit better against like warriors and stuff. So solo lane, maybe mid lane sometimes. Almost never support. Like that's meme stuff again if you're gonna try and do that. Ebo is a mid laner. First and foremost, does really well in the lane, but he also flexes into jungle really, really well. You can play him as a mid lane or jungler. I'm ADC. First and foremost, I've seen people flex him in the mid, but really not too often. You kind of play him as an ADC, build full damage, do your thing. Hell is a mid laner. I've seen her flex as either a solo or support, but like I said before, you need to know what you're doing. You need to know the god very well. You need to know your roles, know your matchups, know how to build them to do those things. Player in mid, if you're ever wondering, but you can flex her into a solo or even a support role. If you do those things, you need to know your team's comp, the other team's comp, like that kind of stuff, or you're going to end up screwing your team if you play her in a role other than mid. Hera, mid lane, that's basically it for her. Hercules is a really good solo laner. He's built as a warrior, does well in that role. He can be flexed as a support character sometimes. Once again, like you're using him, supports are supposed to peel and things like that, so you're trying to like one people off of your teammates and things like that. Like sure, he'll build tanky, but your goal as a support is to try and like save and peel for your backline. He doesn't do it as well. You can also build him full damage, and I've seen people play him jungle, but that's meme stuff as well, right? So basically, Herc is a solo laner. Horus, built as a warrior and meant for solo, does meh as a solo, and not because he's, once again, not because he's bad, but because other gods are good against him, right? They clear better than him. They're just able to do stuff. Horus actually does better as a physical support or even as a jungler, I believe, than a solo laner. The way you can lock somebody down, like one-on-one with him, the way you can go to somebody, stun them, do the auto, knock them up with the wind thing, like and stun them and stuff. He does better as like a setup support, and then with his ultimate as well, right? So setting up for your ADCs, locking somebody down. He's really good at support, as a physical support. And then as a jungler, if you build him full damage with Hydras and like full cooldown, he will literally delete people. If you like gank somebody and just like go up to them and you stun, auto, stun again, like that dude's dead. His lockdown is insane. So try him out as a support or a jungler. He's actually pretty good. Solo, you can still play him as a solo, but I think he just gets out everything by a decent chunk of people. Hou Yi, basically is played as an ADC right now. Very rarely will you flex him as either a he could possibly jungle because of the way his one bounces. You can sometimes clear camps better, but like I don't, that's if you're having fun or messing around. Mid lane, you don't really see him as much either, so he's really an ADC period. Hunbats, jungle, very good, and that's really where you're going to play him. He doesn't flex into other conquest roles very well. Izanami is going to be an ADC first and foremost. Once again, you can flex her into solo only because of like how you can play her specifically, and it's like very rarely in matchups. You are out clearing people. She's a high pressure god, so you need to apply the pressure, get ahead. If you don't, you're screwed. Like you're just so screwed. So play her as an ADC like 95% of the time. Maybe once you learn her a ton and you get like the solo role, you might want to like try her out here and there, but don't play that in like your ranked matches unless you know what you're doing. Yanis is a mid. That's pretty much where he shines the most, mid laner. Jingwei, ADC. That's about all that she is good at, and she does it very well. Gormengunder, built as a support, is a decent guardian, but like most other guardians, he flexes into solo pretty well. So he can be played either as a support or a solo lane, and then if you want to meme and have fun, you're mid, but you're gonna have a bad time. Kali, basically a jungler. That's about it. First and foremost, you can maybe flex her into solo lane if you know your matchup very well. Khepri, support, very good support. Rough to go into other lanes unless you know what you're doing with him, but you can meme around and play him as like full damage attack speed Khepri if you want to have fun. But do that in another game mode like Slash or something. I don't know. He's a support in Conquest. King Arthur, solo in Conquest. That's his main role. Kukulkan, mid in Conquest. That's really all he's good at. I would play him in mid, keep him in mid, do that. Kumbhakarna, support, is really what he's best at. He's not very good at flexing into other roles very well. Kuzenbo, support first and foremost, could possibly be flexed as a solo laner. Not really though. Only sometimes. He's better as a support for sure. Lancelot is built as an assassin, so he belongs in the jungle and he's very good at jungling, but he can be flexed in the solo lane and do really well as a solo. So you build like a half tanky, half damage Lancelot, you're going to cause problems for the other team. So he's a real good solo laner or a jungler. Loki, really good jungler. That's where you're going to see him 95% of the time. Rarely can you play him solo, and that's it. Once again, matchup dependent. If you're good at him, all that stuff, who you're versing, whatever. So jungle first and foremost, maybe solo. Medusa, ADC, so she'll be in duo lane, but she can be flexed into mid. She's one of those ADCs, like those hunters, that can be flexed into mid because you can build her ability based, and she'll do very well as a mid laner too. Mercury basically is a jungler, and that's it. Hard to play him in any other role. He really shines as a jungler first and foremost. Merlin, mid lane. That's about it for him. Morgan Le Fay, mid lane first and foremost. I've seen people flex her into solo. I don't think she's as good as a solo laner. That's rare, few and far in between. And if you're like bored, player is a mid laner. Mulan, really good as a solo laner. She's built as a warrior, does well in the role. You can flex her as a support if you want to. She does okay. Once again, your main thing is like peel and stuff, and you have to hit her bow shots to be able to like peel anybody. She's more of like an aggressive setup. If you're doing that for like support or something. She can also play as a jungle, but like that's for meme stuff, right? Or casuals if you're having fun, whatever. Play her as a solo laner. Neja, jungle first and foremost, really good at it. Neja can also flex as a support or a solo laner. Once again, very niche, but you can do it because her sash, because of her ultimate, it's like the ring toss and stuff. You can normally oppress enemies pretty well with that. So you can build her like full defense and still be able to like peel for your teammates and set people up and stuff like that. So can be played in either of those two roles, but you're gonna see her as a jungle like 95% of the time. That's where she's the best at. Or he. I'm sorry. I always say she for this dude. Look at that card art. That ain't a he. Neith. Neith is an ADC, so she's a carry, played in duo lane. First and foremost, but she can also be flexed into mid lane. She does decently well as a mid laner as well. Every now and then I'll see her as a solo lane too. Once again, matchup dependent. Need to know what you're doing with her. Be able to clear effectively, like the wave effectively and stuff. But she can play any of those 3 roles pretty well. I've even seen Neath jungle. That's if you're memeing and having fun. You build like Mana Conceptor and just one-shot people. Okay, Nemesis. Really good jungler. That's her main role. I see her flex into solo sometimes as well, but mainly a jungler. Nike. Built as a warrior. Really good as a solo laner. Occasionally I've seen her flexed as a support. And then if you're having fun or chilling or whatever, you can play her as a jungler too if you want to build full damage, but mainly a solo laner for Nike. Nox is a mid laner, built as a mid, good as a mage. You got to hit your combo, which is your silence and your root people in there. Be good at her. I have seen her flex as a support. You're going to have a bad time if you can't hit your combo, because if you can't do that, you can't peel for your teammates. But if you build full cooldown and defense with her, she's okay as a support if you know how to play her right. Please know how to hit your combo if you're going to play her as a support. Please know how to hit your combo if you're going to play her as a mid. If you can't hit her combo, don't play Nox. Please, for the love of God. Nuwa, really good as a mid laner. That's what she's designed for. That's what she's good at. If you want to meme around, you can build full tank Nuwa and her clay soldier scale off of her health. So if you build like full defense and health Nuwa, they will be super tanky. You'll be able to get that stun off on them. But that's rare. You're gonna really play her as a mage in mid lane almost all the time. Odin, very good as a solo laner. That's what he's built for. What he's kind of meant for. But I have seen him flexed as a jungler because of his ultimate, the cage and everything, his bird bomb. You can really like dive on people, cage them, kill them, work with your team to do that kind of stuff. I've also seen him flexed as a support before. Solo first, maybe a jungle or support, like 2% of the other time, right? Or if you're trying to have fun or flex around or just mess around with stuff. Olorun does the best as a mid laner or magical ADC. Those are his 2 main roles. Really, either way, you're probably going to build some sort of attack speed on him, whether you're in mid lane or as an ADC. But yeah, he's really good in either role right now. So you can play him as either. He shines in mid right now with his team ult being around all those fights all the time. Using his ult really turns the tides of battle very easily. Osiris. Osiris is a good solo laner. That's what he's built for. That's, you know, his category warrior and everything. Very good in solo lane. Really hard to like counter and stop. Like he just does very, very well right now. He can be flexed into the jungle though. He's actually a pretty decent jungler. If you build him all attack speed and penetration and stuff like that, like you'll do well as a jungle too. So jungle and solo lane for Osiris. Pele. Basically jungle is her main role. You don't really see her in too much else. Her sustain, like you could play her in solo or something like, but once again, you have to be good at her, know your matchups, all that other stuff, but she's going to be a jungle more often than not. Stephanie is a mid laner. That's about it for her. Poseidon is a mid lane. You can, however, flex him as a magical ADC if you want to. The way his tide works, the way his passive works and stuff like that. Getting like the multiple hits on his autos and stuff. He's actually like a pretty good ADC if you want to build him as a magical ADC. Just make sure you get things like flat pen and stuff with him. Like he has more limitations because of like what he can build and stuff, but I think he still works well. So mid or ADC, you can play him as a solo laner. I've seen people play solo Poseidon before, but like I said, you have to be good at them, matchup dependent, etc. But basically mid first and foremost, magical ADC second most, and then occasionally a solo. Ra, you're gonna play him in mid. That's about it for him. Rajan, same thing. He's a mid laner. Rama, ADC, dual lane. Not much else to say about that. Rat is actually pretty flexible as a god. He's built as an assassin, does well as an assassin with his global ultimate and everything, but he can actually be flexed as a solo laner very, very well. With his acorns, you can change his playstyles and kind of what his abilities do and stuff, and he actually flexes as a solo lane really well if you build the proper acorn for him and you build like health and protections and stuff. He's like really hard to kill, honestly. So he's a great great solo laner, good jungle. You could play him as a support if you want, but he doesn't shine as much because remember, like support's supposed to peel. Really, you're only going to be able to peel through your nuts by stunning people with your nuts. So yeah, it's like he doesn't have the best peel option, so he's not. Sure, you could build him tanky and be like, oh, I'm a support because I'm tanky. No, like play him in solo lane if you're going to do that, right? Rav is a jungler, and he's pretty good as a jungler, but he actually shines like pretty well as a solo lane as well. So solo or jungle for Rav. Scylla is a mid laner. That's basically where you're gonna play her like all the time. She's really good as a mid lane. Serket, built as an assassin, pretty good as a assassin. She falls in and out of meta depending on what it is. Right now, I don't think it is a Serket meta. I don't see her played in other things. Like she used to be played as a support. They tried to fix that by like changing her abilities and some things around and stuff like that. Changing and retuning her and stuff. So, unless she's back, like I would rarely see her as a support now. She's really a jungler at this point. Set, probably one of the worst feeling gods in the game right now. I don't know if in the future that changes, but he's basically a jungler. When he wasn't bad, he could be played in solo too. So you'd see him as jungle or solo. But right now, he's basically just a really, really, really bad jungler. Shiva. Shiva is played as a warrior, so in solo lane first and foremost. Can be flexed. I've seen either as like a support or a jungle if you're having fun and memeing around. But if you're serious, play him in solo lane. Scotty basically is an ADC. If you build her ability based, you could maybe flex her into mid. But I think she doesn't do that as well as like some of the other ADCs flex in the mid, right? She's more of just a straight up carry. So play her in dual lane. Sobek, good as a support, meant to play support. Very good, but can be flexed into solo lane. He's actually a decent solo laner. Also, depending on the meta, he'll like come in and out, depending on like some items and stuff like that. But support and solo for him. Soul is a good mid laner as a mage, right? But I think she shines more as a magical ADC, right? So it's like we talked about before, like Freya or Olorun. You can play Soul in dual lane as a magical ADC. Go like Mannequin Scepter or even like Death's Toll, but probably like a Mannequin Scepter is really good on her. Getting those basic attacks and then upgrade like Mannequin Mace late game, and you'll do a lot of damage with her basics. Build her with the rings, throw in like a Typhon's Fang, Rada Tahuti, and she will chunk the balls off people. So mid and ADC for her. Sun Wukong, really good solo lane. That's where you're gonna see him like all the time. More often than not, right? He's like a really, really good and safe solo laner. Susanoo, jungle. That's where you're gonna play him most of the time. Doesn't flex into other roles unless you really know what you're doing. And if that, it's like maybe you'll see him as a solo. But he's like a jungle, like more often than not. Sylvanas is a support character, very good at support. He flexes into solo lane pretty well too. If you build him like with a Mannequin Scepter, so you can clear lane really fast, be oppressive early game, win your lane, outfarm your teammate. He does decently as a solo laner, but really he's like a support, like a very good support character. Terra, good support character. I haven't seen her in solo in a very, very, very long time. I know some people will say you can do it. I'm not good enough with her to do it, and most people aren't. So play her as a support if you're gonna play her. Thanatos, jungler. I have seen him like jungler, like 99% of the time. You're going to play him as a jungle. I have seen him as a solo laner. You can build him a little tankier and be like an alt bot, basically, which is like you can build him tanky, silence people, and heal with your 3 and your 1. And then when people get low in team fights, go and ult them. Like, I mean, you could do that, but really you're going to play him in a jungle more often than not. Morgan, mid lane, that's where she thrives the most. I have seen her because she can transform. You can play her in other roles. I've seen her as a solo do pretty well. Mid and solo are probably the 2 roles you'll see her in the most. She can flex as a jungle if you're having fun messing around, or you're really good with her, or really good in general, right? And then, I mean, I'll see her as a support sometimes, but that's like people trolling or just having fun or memeing around. But yeah, you're really gonna see her in mid, maybe solo, and maybe jungle. That's about it. Thor. Thor is a good assassin. He does jungle okay. Like right now he's not really in meta as much. He falls in and out of it. But he's a good solo laner too. So you can play him in jungle or solo. That's really where I see him the most. You can build him tankier, play him in solo lane, and like do okay. So jungle and solo for Thor. Thoth, mid lane. That's about it. Play him in mid. Tiamat, mid lane for sure. Does really well in that role. I have seen people jungle with her just because of the way she can consume buffs. That's not really, she doesn't really shine there. There's just other junglers that'll do it better. So really a mid laner, maybe solo, like 1 out of 1,000 matches I've seen. People, when she first came out before the nerfs and stuff, she was okay in solo too. Right now, she's just basically played in mid, period. Tsukuyomi, really good as an assassin. As a jungler, full damage, great. Can be flexed as a solo laner if you want. Actually doesn't do too bad with the way he can like space out, use his caltrops. He has like his ranged basics and stuff like that, and his abilities and his stun and stuff. He actually does pretty well in solo lane as well. So solo or jungle for Tsukuyomi. Tier, solo lane first and foremost, period. Very good. You can play him as a jungle or support if you want. Support, once again, you have to make sure you're using him for the peel. He does set up things pretty well, so he's not too bad. But like I don't see Tyr very often. Like Tyr in general right now isn't played as much. Just because he's just one of those characters that's like really fallen off. Like other characters just do things better than he does. I used to see him like a few years ago. He'd be played as a support or like a full tier jungle or something like that, right? If you wanted to have fun. Right now, you can barely even have fun with him in solo lane. So play him in solo if you're going to play anything. So yeah, Uller. Uller's one of those very flexible ADCs because he's more ability based than auto attack. Like you'll see him in dual lane, yes, that's fine. You can always play him there and be okay. But he can flex into mid very well. He can also flex as a solo lane very well. And remember, you want to know what you're doing. You want to play him in solo lane. You want to be like really good at him and know what his strengths are and why you would play him in a solo lane if you're going to play him over there. Because he's just a very good 1v1 god, right? So you can play him in either of those roles and he'll do well. Mid, same thing. You're using your abilities, so you're not going to get boxed out by somebody that's like a mage that can throw stuff at you. You can throw stuff right back at them and do very well. Vamana is a warrior. Vamana also kind of sucks right now. Like him and Tyr just like at the bottom of the solo lane list right now. I don't see him played anywhere else besides solo. I would say you could like meme around and do full damage jungle Vamana, but even then you probably wouldn't have fun. so yeah, play him in solo lane. Vulcan, mid lane. Play him in mid lane. That's what he's best at. X-Ball, basically he's a pure ADC. Play him there. In duo lane. Jing Chen, very good support. Very good support. Can be flexed as a solo laner as well. For him. Umoja, basically purely a support character. Very good at what she does. Yeah, so it's support for her. Ymir, Ymir is a good support character, can be flexed as a solo, can also be played as a jungle. You're gonna see him in support 95% of the time, solo in the other 4%, and like 1% you're gonna have some meme dude running around as Ymir jungle freezing and smacking you in the head with poly and deleting you. Yu Huang, Yu Chuang, mid lane, basically what he's best at. Zeus, mid lane as well. And then the last one, Zhong Kui. Zhong is a very good mid laner. He is very beefy, does well with lifesteal, so he has a lot of sustain. So it actually makes him very viable in solo lane as well. So for him, play him in mid. You can maybe flex him into solo lane, and that's it. That is every freaking god in Smite. All 121s, what roles they're best at, what they can flex into. I hope you guys like that video. Maybe it helped you know, hey, I could play this here or there. If you want me to go more in depth on any of them and where they can be played, I make a god guide. So go and check and see if I've made a god guide for these gods yet. So I do a quick god guide. They're like, I say quick god, but they're like 30-40 minutes sometimes. I just go over the god. I go over their abilities, some builds for them, where they can be played, why they can be flexed in certain roles, why their kit makes them good in a certain role. So go check that out. Subscribe to the page if you haven't. Go check out my Smite guide videos. There's going to be a bunch because I do literally a video for every single god in Smite. So you guys can learn more about them, learn them a little bit more intricately, and hopefully get better at them. And if you guys haven't yet, join the Smite Dojo, the Discord server. It's going to be in the link in the description. And yeah, thank you guys very much for watching the video. I hope you guys learned something. And yeah, stay tuned for more videos. I will do a lane video. So I'll go through solo and talk about what gods are best at it. I'll go through mid lane, talk about like the top like 5 or 6 gods for each role, right? And what makes them so good at it. So stay tuned for that, and thank you guys very much. And hey, have a great day.